Welcome back, David. Gonna pick your brain again.
All right.
A lot about like environment, sun, habits, routines. Summer is coming, spring is here. So to speed up everything, we see a lot of these groups popping up that are doing some kind of detox, some kind of cleanse, something to kind of supercharge physiology to be at your best in summer. Let's say that's how I perceive that notion that's going to happen. But what really is the detox? What are the basics of it? And is there something that people miss out when they say, you know what, I'm going to jump on this thing. It sounds like a great idea. And as with everything, we know that there is no such thing as free thing. It might come at cost. And is that cost paying off afterwards, or is it making you a little bit worse? So could you open up and explain what is detox? What does it even mean?
Yeah. So detox, most people kind of understand like the meaning of the word, detoxing as like, getting rid of heavy metals or things in your body that aren't supposed to be in there and that sort of stuff. So I'll kind of skip over that part, but there's a system built into your body that does the detoxing. That's probably the most important thing to understand. What is that system? That's your liver. That's your kidneys, that's your lymph system, and your skin. These are all organs that enable the detoxification system of your body. Let's call it that, right? Now, how do they do that? This is voltage dependent. Literally, I mean that in the sense of it's electrically dependent. It's driven by mitochondrial energy. And as if you've listened to any of our talks, when I break down mitochondrial energy, it's not just about making ATP. The act of making an ATP requires electrical conductivity, electron flow. Um, and so what do what you basically want to do when doing a proper detox? It doesn't involve, drinking special magical juices or any of that. There are some things you could consume when you'll get into that a little bit, but what it really means is you want to upregulate your liver, your kidneys, your lymph system, and your skin's capabilities to detox. How do you raise up their capabilities? You give them more energy, right? Hopefully that makes pretty good sense to just about anybody, right? Like if you don't have enough energy in those specific organ systems, they're not going to do their job very well. So that goes back to kind of our basics, right? Sunlight, for example, fuels cytochrome P450, which is an enzyme in the liver specifically. It's in different parts of the body, but in the liver has a lot of this enzyme. That is also coincidentally your major detox organ. Your liver kind of filters all your blood, for lack of a better way to say it, to visualize it the best. And so you want to make sure that the P450 enzymes in the liver are upregulated as much as possible. That is a heme protein. What does that mean? It means that it is um, going to be light sensitive, specifically infrared light sensitive. All proteins are sensitive to infrared light, meaning they gain more energy, something called enzymatic action. So let's think of it like you're pushing a rock up a hill. It takes a lot of energy to get that rock up the hill. But once that rock is at the top of the hill, all of that energy is sitting there as potential energy. And if you roll that rock downhill, you've unleashed all of that energy. Does that make sense? So when you upregulate an enzyme through light mechanisms, it's like you pushed the rock uphill, but you didn't have to do any of the work. The light provided the energy to put the rock up the hill. And now it has all this free energy that obviously it takes much less energy to just push the rock over the hill than to push it all the way back up the hill. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does make sense. And I already have a question that I'm pretty sure you can answer immediately. Is this why most of these detoxes are usually advertised in like tropical areas? And then afterwards, everyone's like, wow, this is amazing.
I don't know if they do it on purpose, but that would make the whole detox cleanse work way better,
Hmm.
right? Because most of these detox cleanses involve eating very little food. and possibly fasting, a lot of water. Obviously there's the whole magical juice or concoction that they're having you take, but that's probably not doing anything. The major mover is probably that it is in a completely different area that has a lot of sunlight, and usually in places where there's a lot of sunlight, the activities around this type of retreat, if you want to call it that, usually are outside, right? Usually are outside. And we'll talk about that a little bit because that has to do with your lymph system and your skin, right? Your skin is going to, because number one, infrared light will penetrate and hit the liver and upregulate this P450 enzyme. But moving around just outside, especially when you're sweating, is going to upregulate the skin's ability to detox and the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system, people don't know, requires movement. You cannot sit or lay in bed and have your lymphatic system work. It doesn't work that way. It's not like blood vessels. It doesn't flow, right? There isn't a mechanism that makes it flow. You know what makes the lymphatic system flow? Compression and contraction of your muscles. So if you're tried to do the exact same thing, like you mentioned, a retreat for a cleanse somewhere, tropical. If you tried to do the same thing, you took the same products, but you're in the UK in the middle of winter and you're in your apartment all day long for the whole week, you're not going to get the same result. You didn't upregulate the skin, you didn't upregulate the lymph system, you didn't upregulate the liver, right? So right away, depending on your experience with these detoxes, right? Most people will find that if you try to do I've got all the ingredients and I'm doing it in my home and it's in the middle of winter, most people will experience possible downregulation or not feeling well, right? You're going to experience brain fog. You're going to experience feeling like crap for an extended period of time. The reason is because you're not providing excess energy at these organs that I just talked about for the detoxing to happen correctly. So it could actually be harmful if done in the wrong environment. Other things, right, like grounding, for example, if you're out on the beach, you're probably not wearing any shoes, right? So what does that mean? The earth is giving you free electrons, which what does that do? It lowers inflammatory responses. We know this from studies from grounding and stuff like that. And then most places that are tropical, you experience what's called like the sundown effect. Basically, whenever you're closer to the equator, you don't have this extended dusk or dawn period. Basically, the sun comes up and it's light, and the sun goes away and it gets dark, really dark. Sometimes these retreats are also in places that are kind of remote. What does that mean? That means you're not going to have melatonin dysregulation because you don't have as many people around you with devices and things of that nature. And if it's really remote, you might not even have access to like Wi-Fi and all of that all over the place, or only in select areas. You'll find that a lot in these types of retreats. And so that's going to make it so the melatonin production goes up. What's melatonin? First and foremost, it's not a sleep hormone. It is an antioxidant, which also upregulates the glutathione system, which is the major antioxidant in humans. And so that is, all the different ways that the environment can do that. Now, hydration is super, super critical for detoxing correctly. And I don't mean just drinking normal water. Like you can drink normal water, but what I'm saying is hydration at the cellular level is what matters in the detoxing, right? So we're talking about making sure, so everything that we just talked about upregulates the mitochondria in these organ systems. When you upregulate the mitochondria, hopefully it's making plenty of its own cellular water. And that's the hydration that we're talking about. That cellular water, we've talked about it in previous episodes, is actually very special water. It's not the normal water that you drink. It's deuterium depleted. It's been selected for through the TCA process to have very little heavy hydrogen or deuterium in it. Most of the water in the cell should be around 110 to 100 parts per million of deuterium. Most drinking water is around 150. Right. So if you really wanted to like go all in on a detox and you want to drink all the celery juice or whatever that you're being coached to do, if you really want to make that as efficient as possible, you should make those juices out of deuterium depleted water. You should use deuterium depleted water for the smoothies, for the juices, to really, really ramp up your body's ability to detox, because the deuterium depleted water is going to be a step that your body doesn't have to do.
And that's something you mentioned before as well, but disregarding all this on different topic as well, that it doesn't need to be huge amounts, even just like let's say one glass is better than what you have been doing so far, right?
Yeah, because you're basically going to let's for example, let's just give an example. Say you drink 2 liters of water a day, right? And you can afford to drink half a liter of deuterium depleted water every day. Well, that's literally 25% of the water that you've drank or the fluids that you've drank that is now deuterium depleted. That's a lot better than zero, right? Any amount, because deuterium depleted water or light water, if you want to call it, your body is biased towards keeping that in cells. So any amount that you consume is going to be kept in the cells and not excreted through urine. Your body's going to be, biased towards it. So any amount that you take in is going to be held in hyperhydrate. So the caveat there is if you drink very little amounts, it just takes longer to accumulate in the cells. But as long as you do it regularly, it really will. You could accelerate that to like 1 liter of water. Right now, 50% of the water that you're drinking is deuterium depleted. So you've effectively lowered your deuterium load by 50%.
So you explained everything on like a really in-depth, way deeper than I would even expect. Like what is a detox, what it does, lymphatic and skin and all those kind of things. Is there some kind of baseline measurement merit that you would see and would tell, let's say, somebody you work with, you know what? Would be great if you did detox because these blood markers are off, maybe some kind of scale on mood reflection or something like that. Or maybe even going a bit further on and tell somebody who's reaching out and tell it, hey, David, I'm going to do a detox. What do you think about it? And he would say, you know what, make sure that these markers are good because otherwise you're going to harm yourself. Is there something
Yeah.
like this?
Yeah. So, for example, if somebody was just reaching out that they were going to do a detox, most likely they probably don't need it, like a true detox. Like you're going to take like some medications like chelators and binders and those types of things to get rid of toxins in your body. Most people are probably so. Let's talk about the high serum copper or you actually get a heavy metals test that shows that you have those, right? So it's not just copper, it's any heavy metal, right? But copper could be one of them that's could be tested for very easily. But there's a whole list of them. There's arsenic, there's cadmium, there's nickel, there's aluminum, etc. If you have a test that shows those are high, you need a detox. Right. At that point, what you need to do is number one, identify where they're coming from. Right. They didn't get there by accident. Right. Maybe it's the city you live in and it's in the air. Maybe it's the water you're drinking, etc. Right. Like is number one. So if you truly come back with blood markers or markers that are show, hey, you have heavy metals in your body, the very first thing you need to do is figure out where they came from. They didn't get there by accident. If you do not remove that, you can detox once and you're going to accumulate them again.
Mm.
So that's number one. Number two, if they are truly high, then the things that I just spoke about become incredibly important because if you start taking binders or chelators or anything to get rid of these heavy metals and you have not upregulated your liver or your kidneys, your lymph system, and your skin to be able to take care of them, you're going to feel like crap. You're going to feel like crap for a very long time. Now, if you don't have any of these markers or you've gotten them and they're not really elevated and you still want to do a detox, then I would say the simplest way to do this is get plenty of movement in, get plenty of sunlight in. If there is no sunlight, cold exposure upregulates the NRF2 pathway, which is a major detox regulator gene to make sure that, and basically it does that through biophotons. So whenever you get cold, your bodies, your mitochondria release infrared light and UV light internally, right? Now, it needs to be done regularly, just like sunlight would need to be done regularly, but essentially they upregulate the same pathways inside these organ systems and stuff like that. And then movement, so that you upregulate your lymphatic system. And then you could supplement external light. Like, for example, if you live in the UK in the winter or whatever, you could do um, like an infrared bed with UV light added to it. Or what I would probably do is I would just do a sauna, like a steam sauna, and I would take in a UV light panel, like a UVA and UVB panel, into the sauna with me to get UV light at the same time that you're getting a lot of infrared from the sauna. The steam will help the skin, the pores in the skin open up and get you sweating much faster, etc. So though that would be like a hybrid way to detox in the wintertime. Swedish people do that all the time, all winter long, basically. Um,
Sauna and then cold plunge. That's what we do
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
every week. Exactly.
Yep. And then the other thing is, are there, uh, most people that there's some style of detoxes that involve a lot of fasting and that sort of stuff. If you aren't healthy, right? For example, there will be some things, some minerals that I would want to check before you do that type of fast. Things like magnesium, zinc, and selenium are huge, huge contributors to phase one and phase two liver enzyme detoxification pathways of the liver. So if you're low on magnesium, zinc, and selenium, fasting type detoxes or detoxes that eliminate a lot of food probably aren't your go-to. You would want to, like, for example, you get a lot of selenium, iodine, and magnesium from seaweeds, right? So just eating seaweed if you wanted to, or capsules, powdered, or any of those. And the zinc, coming with like oysters. Again, both of these can be powdered. There's powdered oysters these days. There's powdered seaweed. They're whole food. They've just been powdered. So they would be the next best thing to like the real deal. So those two would be like foods that I would include even if you are doing a restrictive type detox, because you're going to need to upregulate your liver's ability to get all this done. That's going to be magnesium, zinc, and selenium dependent. Iodine will also help with that. And then if you include some deuterium depleted water, you have a pretty good winning combination, even if you are going to be restricted on the, what you can consume when you detox. Um,
You're describing really like powerful combinations there. And I just want to go back and pick up on something you said that drinking some kind of smoothies and this and that might not be useful for anyone. Would it not be useful for somebody who's never eaten good at all? Meaning they only eat processed foods, they don't move a lot, they are 40% body fat or more, they are constantly inflamed on a lot of drugs. Would they still not get any benefit, or they might get a little bit of benefit, but you are going like, okay, if you're doing this, you might as well do it properly and get the
yeah,
most.
yeah, because again, most of the smoothie fasts or detoxes, I should say, are going to involve lemon juice. They're going to involve celery juice. They're going to involve beet juice, or they're basically going to be juicing fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, and
No,
it sounds like they are juicing fruits and vegetables that are extremely powerful already, right?
yeah, they have a lot of antioxidants, right? That's kind of the trend that you'll see with any of these detox smoothies is that they have a lot of antioxidants. That's not bad and that's good. But here's the thing, right? If you are somebody that you just described, you're overweight, you're very lethargic, you're on medications, etc., your deuterium load is probably through the roof.
Mm.
Any fruit, right? So fruits would be the first thing that I would cut out of any of these smoothies. Any fruit has a high amount of deuterium in it compared to other foods. So I would probably stick to the vegetables like the celery juice and stuff like that. And I would probably make my smoothies or my drinks with deuterium depleted water to ensure that you are reducing your deuterium load. And then I would include a lot of movement or a lot of sweating, because you're probably somebody who's deficient in, like you just described, movement and inducing these effects of the skin and the lymphatic system working together to pull toxins out of your body. So that's where I would go with something like just movement outside. If the weather is warm, right? If you've got plenty of sunlight, then you're getting three things there. You're getting an upregulation in heat shock proteins. You're getting sweating. You're upregulating the skin, and if you're moving outside, you're upregulating the lymphatic system.
And
If
if
you
you're
can't
in
do
UK,
that,
you get a cold shock as well.
It's well, very, very true, right? So that would also be improvement, right? So at the end of the day, being outside is one of the golden rules to like really make everything kind of work well.
Mhm.
Can you hybridize this and not doing it outside? The answer is yes, but that's when you got to get your thinking cap on. And because some of these things, like for example, the person you just described, I would not recommend something like oxygen therapy for them. That could potentially be dangerous for them. It might make them feel good temporarily, but it could lead to um, too much electron flow in faulty mitochondria. So think of it like bad wiring in a house that all of a sudden you've hooked up to the modern power grid. You're going to burn up wires. You're going to eventually make them not think well and stuff like that because oxygen is the end electron acceptor. So what if you pour a bunch of oxygen into the mitochondria, the electron flow is going to go faster. But
Mm.
if the mitochondria are faulty and not working correctly, what are you going to make? You're going to make more reactive oxygen species,
Mm.
right? And that's a bad thing. So some of these protocols or some of these adjuncts like HBOT therapy, oxygen chambers, if you're healthy, great. If you're not healthy, potentially bad. What I would do instead for somebody like this is CO2 therapy because CO2 is what upregulates. It's the other side of that electron flow. It upregulates the mitochondria's reaction to faulty mitochondria. In other words, when you consume CO2, if the mitochondria are bad, you actually go through a apoptosis on those mitochondria and you get rid of them. And so then you only operate with good mitochondria. And so after maybe a month of some
Interesting.
CO2 therapy, then you could introduce some oxygen therapy.
Would this be why I personally see a lot of rugby players and boxers get really good results from hyperbaric oxygen chambers?
Probably because they're already fit, their mitochondria are already working very well,
Hmm. So, is
right?
there any other methods apart from nutrition, cold? Is there some kind of like maybe, meditation, breath work? I don't like calling meditation
Well,
because
so going
visual
along the
magic.
lines, yeah, breath work, right? Breath work meaning anything that's called bukkake breathing, box breathing, breath holds, anything that makes you more CO2 tolerant or makes your body retain CO2 is like a sub form of CO2 therapy. So that for somebody that's not fit, that's a great way to start. Is just nasal breathing.
Hmm.
Would be an easy one because you're not expelling as much CO2 as when you open your mouth. So you're starting to retain more CO2, which upregulates certain enzymatic processes of the mitochondria. Then you could upgrade that to box breathing, and then from there to breath holds, and then from there to possibly CO2 therapy, right? So there's some steps in there. They all are on a spectrum of retaining CO2 to upregulate this mitochondrial um, signaling. Um,
Is there a
because
minimal time necessary for somebody to feel positive effects? And is there too much of this that can kind of backfire? Is they do
Yeah.
every
Well,
single thing we just mentioned, and they
yeah.
say, I'm gonna do light exposure, cold exposure, heat exposure. I'm gonna do everything.
Mhm.
How long they should do it to feel the benefits, and when does it reach point of you're doing too much? Don't do it 2 weeks in a row.
Well, so for example, like let's break this down. Everything that I have just talked about has nothing to do with restricting your food, has nothing to do with exclusively drinking or eating anything. So if you just do just the things that I said, hey, bring in more deuterium depleted water, get more sunlight, get more movement, bring in some cold, potentially add in some saunas and stuff like that. You could basically do those on a schedule of some kind,
Mm.
every single week for as long as you want without really something, because all you're doing is upregulating the capabilities of detoxing. And maybe you fast once a day or sorry, once a week, right? That would expedite this. If you did it like that, you could basically do it indefinitely. You're probably going to feel great. Now,
Let me see if I can tie it into, let's say, gym environment. Sorry
mhm.
to interrupt you a little bit. So it's basically what you're saying now. If you do these things, it's like going to the gym, practicing your movement first, then getting accustomed to equipment, then getting accustomed to coming and doing it in the same time every single week, every single day, or so on and so forth, then figuring out how to increase intensity but not damage yourself beyond repair and carry on. If you do it in that sense, you can do this indefinitely, and you're probably not going to run into a point where your body feels like, I need heavy detox. I need to go somewhere in Mexico, disappear for a week just to restore my body.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? So basically, you're upregulating your capabilities to detox every single day, week after week, and it's never going to be an overload. Now, if you did all these things, but you included something like, hey, I'm only going to drink, concoction A, B, or C for a whole week,
Hmm.
that could potentially lead to detrimental effects if you did it for longer. The restriction part, right? I'm only drinking this, I'm only eating this, or I'm only consuming these specific foods for a week. If you did it for a week, probably not much is going to happen, especially if you're doing these things, you're going to help that process happen. But I wouldn't do the restrictive part for longer than about a week at any point in time, really, because it's not that you will run into, you could, right? You could, right? It really depends. That's why I say if you have actual blood markers that show, hey, I have heavy metals, you might need to do it for a week, for longer than a week, right? But that's because you actually physically need something to get rid of. If you don't have them or they're not dysregulated and you're just needing to, like, you just feel the need to do it, I would say keep it to a week, because after a week, you're just not going to be a, now, if you live somewhere, like say you live in Mexico, you could probably do it much more often or anywhere near the equator. And the reason for that is if you are getting outside regularly, you're going to make up the deficit of being so restrictive in the consumption of your food and stuff like that by sunlight and grounding and all of these, because all of these drive electrons into the body, right? Remember what food turns into. It all turns into electrons. So depending on where you live, you could be very restrictive for longer periods of time and still be okay. But if you don't live there or don't live where you're in a lifestyle that's conducive to getting free electrons from the environment, then I would say don't do the restrictive part for very long, maybe a week at the most. Because you will run into fatigue, you will run into brain fog, and there will be a big rebound from that just from food consumption because you basically have starved your body from electrons for a week. Now your body's going to be like, hey, I need electrons. What does that mean? That means you're going to get cravings. You're going to eat a whole bunch of junk after, all of that type of stuff. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of the whole detox thing.
So doing 30-day detox in the middle of New York before Christmas might not be the best idea.
That's probably, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Uh, and then, and then there are natural, because I mentioned, if you have heavy metals and things of that nature, you're probably going to need some medications to like bind and things of that nature. There are natural binders. There are natural binders that you can consume just naturally in your diet. If
When you
you
say binders, do you want to expand on that? What so people what
Yeah, so there's this thing called endotoxins, right? Like everybody kind of understands this a little bit from the perspective of synthetic chemicals and stuff like that that you might be that might be in your processed food, that might be in the things that you put on your skin, that might be on the things that you know that you're drinking because your water is treated of some kind. And so binders literally bind to endotoxins at the digestive level. So things that you're consuming, right? There is things like Cruella. I think that's how you pronounce it, and spirulina. These are, one of them is a bacteria. The spirulina is a bacteria. The Cruella is a green algae. These are known endotoxin binders. They also have all the amino acids that you would need. They are a complete protein source. They are a little bit of a expensive, but they do activate UV porphins. In other words, these are UV chromophores, right? The reason why they're blue and they're green is because they actually uh, attract everything except for that color. So, in other words, when you consume spirulina or chlorella, you're actually able to absorb more red light,
Mm.
which is going to upregulate the mitochondria in those organ systems, et cetera, all of those types of things. So, the so it does two things. It binds to things that shouldn't be in your body, any endotoxin. It will bind to that and helps you eliminate them through your fecal matter. And it activates and acts as a UV and infrared light chromophore. So your body's able to absorb more of that. So they're good for places that have low sunlight yield. You're going to be able to absorb more of that. Um, the other thing is they're going to probably improve gut dysbiosis and stuff like that. That's another reason why people might do a cleanse, right? Is because they're having a lot of digestive problems. When somebody's having a lot of digestive problems, that means that they are not getting enough UV light and infrared light in the digestive tract, right? You're not getting a lot of sunlight on your stomach. You're not getting a lot of sunlight on your torso, or you're not experiencing a lot of cold on the torso or because both of those, cold or sunlight, upregulates the amount of infrared and UV light that will be in the digestive tract. And so consuming something like spirulina or chlorella and doing some cold exposure is a great way to upregulate that process in the digestive tract.
Uh, Talk me through, because you mentioned some blood tests to be done, basically on heavy metals. What other markers could be useful? Liver, kidney, things like that. Could it be something
um,
that you could test it before and after to see if it's efficient, or is it relevant at all, or what's happening there?
you won't really like if it gets really bad, like you have acute heavy metal poisoning. Yes, your liver enzymes will be elevated, your kidney enzymes will be elevated. If you have just one, like for example, I've seen some blood work with people with really high arsenic, like really high arsenic. They didn't have any liver markers that were off. They didn't have any kidney markers that were off. It was only the direct tests that showed, hey, you have like, and I'm not talking like a little bit high. It was 100 times higher than it should be. So it was quite elevated. And
So
liver,
do I get it right that you could have a blood test panel and everything seems right, and you still feel suspicious? And only when you do like a deeper dive, you understand, okay, these are the things I need to take care of. Whereas
correct,
the
right?
doctor
So
will tell you, hey,
that's
you're
what
fine.
I'm saying. Most people, doing the detoxes, they have no idea whether they need
Right.
it or not because they're not going out of their way to test for the heavy metals. This person had a lot of fatigue, had a lot of brain fog, et cetera, all these things, right? Symptoms that would want you to detox. Um, but you looked at her blood work, it wasn't great, but nothing really was like, oh yeah, you clearly need, to detox. There wasn't anything in there in her liver or in her kidneys, markers or anything like that that was dysregulated. But she, obviously felt that she had something wrong. So it's like, oh, and for example, right, arsenic is you're not going to detox. Most of that detoxing is going to come from not consuming the water heavy in arsenic. Arsenic is water soluble, right? So that was the first thing she needed to do. Hey, some of the fluid that you're drinking, or most of it, right, because our levels were really high, has arsenic in it. Get it tested. Stop drinking it. That sort of stuff, right? So, no matter because arsenic, is a fluid based type heavy metal. She could have gone through multiple detoxes and never gotten better because
Hmm.
she's consuming it regularly. That's the problem when you truly do have a heavy metal problem or a toxin problem. You need to figure out where it's coming from. They don't just get into your body by accident. That's why I started with that. Um, and once you do that, then you can eliminate that, and then you can get the correct approach because it was the only heavy metal, right? She tested for about 10 heavy metals. That was the only one that was out of whack. Well, that one's easy to treat if you eliminate it and then you just go, they literally have an arsenic binder that you can just take for that, right? So that's, she wasn't going to get any results from a lemon juice cleanse for arsenic, right?
Right.
So if you have a true heavy metal problem, you need to know which one or how many, and then target them specifically and get rid of how they're getting into your body.
Let me go into this because we both know psychology is number one. Like whatever you do, you need to have a right, correct mindset to make sure everything works, or otherwise you're not going to stick with it. Could this detox, whatever, somebody has seen it online and they're going to go, let's say, to Cancun, do a detox, they reset their physiology, and then they follow what you prescribe, because that sounds like a lifelong approach. So you would never have to do any kind of detox afterwards. Is that correct? Is that something that you would say, you know what? It's like going to the gym. If you go on your own and try to figure out through internet, I need to do this, I need to do that, instead of hiring a personal trainer who's a professional and tells you exactly what you do on the first week, and you get hooked on immediately, and then you go on your own. Could this be linked to, hey, okay, you're doing this detox, go and enjoy yourself, but when you come back, these are the things you need to keep following to make sure you never need to go back? Could this be a
Correct.
great approach for somebody to buy in psychologically, so that their physiology never go revert back to where they were always fatigued?
Yes, I would say that that would be a very, very wise thing to do, especially if you already know that you don't necessarily have any heavy metals, right? But say you get a test for heavy metals
Mhm.
and you don't have anything that's dysregulated, but you still feel like there's something, right? Because heavy metals are only heavy metals, right? You could have mold poisoning, you could have all kinds of other endotoxins, right? Maybe you have a buildup of some kind of synthetic endotoxin from something like that. So going somewhere like that, kickstarting the process, and then continuing these habits to some degree or all of them would definitely make it so that you get more runway out of that detoxing event and potentially not have to do it again, depending on the level of toxicity that you got rid of. So yeah, there would be those, right? But the biggest thing that I want to leave people is your body has a built-in detoxification system. If you support it, it should be able to get rid of quite a few toxins on its own without really needing to do anything drastic. Um, and then the only time that it does need to be drastic is when you actually have something that, and maybe you just don't have the right people around you to test for the right things, right? Like maybe you didn't know that you could test, for 20 or 30 different heavy metals in your body. Well, now you do, and then you can get those types of tests. Or maybe you didn't know that you could test for mold and things of that nature in your blood or in your gut and things of that nature. So if you don't know that, that's where you need to start if you do suspect that you have endotoxins, because endotoxins or heavy metals or any of those things, because you need to figure out how they're getting into your body.
And that's something I wanted to ask before I let you go. What are, let's say, top three or top five lifestyle or environmental factors that you could assess? Let's say you have an interview with somebody and you would go like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm living here, I'm doing that. And you would go like, you know what, that might be a good idea because your blood tests are showing everything is great, but you're still fatigued, to run a really deep test on these things, because we
Yeah.
might do a cleanse, a detox, and so on. So what would be those lifestyle or environmental factors that can compromise someone's health?
Well, I would want to know, lifestyle wise, I would want to know a couple things. I want to know their unsupplemented vitamin D level or DHEA level, preferably both, because that tells me how much sunlight they're getting, not how much time they spend outside, because you can spend a lot of time outside and not get very much of sunlight on your body, um, depending on the clothes that you wear and stuff like that. So I want to know those markers, and then I would just ask them, hey, how much time do you actually spend outside? Are you underdressed? Are you overdressed, et cetera? Those types of things, because those are what's going to upregulate the detoxification system and the creation of melanin. Melanin is a chelator and a heavy metal binder, right? Melanin on your skin, melanin in your body, etc. Um, and then the other thing that I would want to know is how heavily populated is the area that you live in, right? Basically, that starts to tell me is a couple things, right? It starts to tell me about pollution. It starts to tell me about possible air pollutants that might be getting into your body. It starts to tell me about the water quality that might be getting into your body. And it also starts to tell me about the potential of mold and bad bacteria, black mold, things of that nature, because those types of bacteria and mold and fungi are, how would I say, reproducing at a higher level when there are man-made electromagnetic fields around them. There are studies that show this. You can take the same black mold, put it out in the middle of the country, it doesn't grow very much. You put that same black mold inside a heavy electromagnetic field city, and it grows like crazy. And it has an electric, these organisms have the ability to reproduce by consuming non-native electromagnetic fields. Actually, we know this even from radiation and things of that nature in Chernobyl, right? They found that there are black mold and black fungi that are growing in Chernobyl at an accelerated rate because the melanin they're producing, the reason they're black is because they're producing a shit ton of melanin. The melanin is actually enabling them to absorb all the radiation, all the electromagnetic field in that area, and they're using it for energy to grow the organism, right? So that's why you see black mold, black funguses, that sort of stuff in heavy electromagnetic field cities, or even in radioactive places like Chernobyl and stuff like that. So, and the consequence to that is they give off spores, and those spores are toxic to human animals, essentially.
David, I'm going to let you off. We could talk another 2, 3 hours about this, but I appreciate your time as usual, and I'll speak to you in the next video.
Awesome. Thank you.